Hello, everybody. Welcome to Doomer Optimism. I am here with Rich Bartlett, and I called in my friend, the expert, to talk about this upcoming event that I'm organizing with Paul Kingsnorth and Matt Crawford, two authors I really, really admire. And I'll tell Rich a little bit of the backstory, none of which he's heard, and then we can just jump into a conversation. But so I organized a small private event in Wyoming last October, October of 2023. And Paul Kingsnorth came. He's like a friend of a friend. He got invited, and it was just this huge like boon and excitement among people in the Doomer Optimism circle who love this author, and he's just rarely comes to the US. So I kind of just intuitively organized that event based on who was coming. I kind of talked to them one-on-one about what kind of talk they would want to give. I put together some talks, but then as the conference was happening, people were asking to speak. And so we were just kind of throwing them into the schedule. And then I was remembering I went to Rich's event, and it was like a co-created retreat type event. So I was remembering back to some of how that was organized during this Wyoming event and kind of running with it and trying to like make it co-created and make everybody feel like they've got a chance to speak, who wants to speak and who doesn't, doesn't have to. Now that this second event is happening, Paul Kingsnorth is coming back to the United States. He's always wanted to meet this author, Matt Crawford. It's like a really big deal, at least in my world, because these are two of the most interesting thinkers on these topics of like basically like how to live in modernity. And they're asking really like deeply spiritual questions and moral questions. And these two wanted to meet each other for the first time. They asked me to facilitate this, which I'm still like shocked by. So what I decided to do was get a really small venue that only hosts 50 people, small community theater in upstate New York. Paul and Matt are going to start the event by basically co-interviewing each other, just having a conversation about like themes that arise in both of their work to set the stage for the conference. In the middle of the conference, this is where you come in, it's co-created. And then at the end, Paul and Matt will have another conversation, basically like reflecting on what happened over the course of the 2 days. So where Rich comes in is he's like the expert on these kinds of things, very, very thoughtful. And I thought it might be helpful to just kind of think out loud about this particular event and how to do the practicalities of a co-created event. And it would just be helpful to other people who would maybe want to do something similar.
Fun. Yeah, I like thinking about this stuff with you.
Yeah, me too.
How long is the event?
It's only 2 days. It'll start on a morning for like a Friday morning and go all day Friday, go all day Saturday, and then Sunday people leave. The other thing
Okay.
I'll mention is both Paul and Matt wanted to do some kind of like shared meal. So we're doing a potluck together at the end of each night, which will be
Sweet.
really fun. So like somebody's going to take the lead on the entree and other people will bring things and we'll all just kind of eat together, which will be super nice.
Sweet. So does that mean people are kind of self-organizing their accommodation
They're
and then it's like you
self-organizing accommodation and breakfast and lunch.
yeah, yeah. Is there any have you had any thought about how to make the most of that lunch?
No, and that's another thing. Like a friend of mine asked, what are people doing for lunch? And I said, well, I know some people will be like renting Airbnbs, so maybe people could self-organize like small groups where they get together over lunches. But I also, it's one of those things, this is like the core of what I'm interested in talking with you about today, how to nudge people in the
Mm,
right direction and give them options to make the most of that time, but not be so controlling and schedule every minute,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. So I guess I'm your role model for controlling and overscheduled.
But you let people choose, like you give them
Okay.
options and then they
Yeah.
have like,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's good to zoom out before we get into the details of like, planning
yeah,
lunch and things, but like um tune in a little bit with like what's the purpose or like what would be a really great outcome. Like I immediately what comes to mind for me, there's you, there's the two authors, and then there's everyone that's coming. And maybe
yeah,
they've got kind of different motivations or desires. Can you like just unpack some of that?
yeah. So my model is the event in Wyoming, which again, I was not explicit about what the goal was beyond. I think these people who are all here need to meet one another, and come to know one another. And by that I mean kind of reveal themselves in some capacity and be known so that other people like know what they're up to and who they are, and then kind of make friendships out of that, which is totally what happened in Wyoming. And then so I want people who are working, I think, particularly with this, let's just call it anti-machine type people. And so by that, I mean, like, there's a guy coming who literally does like timber framing, craft masonry, artists, like super high skilled artisans who do it because they're trying to preserve like civilizational culture, the culture of our civilization, like quite seriously. But a lot of them are really lonely. Like a
Mm,
lot of them are people who don't have like a core group, and they're not like super connected, and a lot of them are not very online. And so um like I think part of it is to try to make people feel like there is a cohesive sense here. There are other people, you're not alone. I want to know who you are. I want to support your work, whatever way I can do that. And so what happened in Wyoming is that like everybody was having such a good time. Then friendships formed out of that. And then we have like now a group chat that people are sharing things and deepening their friendships. And then, somebody comes up and they're like, I just wrote a book. Will you promote my book? And it's like this, these friendships that turn into like real social capital. And then the
mm.
other thing is like, I know you said this um at our event in Colorado, but like I want people to have like a peak experience, like I want in Wyoming in the morning, and this was also owing to my dear buddy Paul McNeil, who hosted us at his place, the Wagon Boxes. Was really a magical place. But in the morning, a lot of the men would go and plunge in the creek, and it was winter. And then they would go in the sauna together, and then everyone would eat breakfast together, and then we had these talks, and then like we're eating lunch, and people are having snowball fights, and then the first evening there was like a spontaneous open mic, and then the second evening, people just kind of wanted to talk to each other, and no one really wanted to play music. And everyone was just like so thrilled to just go deep, like, and there was a bar there, so we could, have deep conversations. And then the third evening, this in Wyoming, we did these micro debates. And the way that was formed, I'm telling all these details so you get a sense of like the vibe. The way the micro debates worked was somebody would propose a topic that they wanted to take the pro side on, and ask for a challenger. And so they'd have like 30 seconds, and the most hilarious one was my friend Andy taking the pro side on drunk driving in rural areas as like a show of masculinity, and like the breakdown of community was really driven by like these drunk driving laws, and like
Wow.
um and everyone's just laughing because it's tongue in cheek, but like and then somebody responded like, no, this is just stupid. Anyway, so like the micro debates were super raucous, and everyone was like laughing super hard, and like happy hour at the same time. So anyway, so I want the vibes to be like great and like familiar and informal, and
Mm,
not like a
mm,
conference at all.
mm,
But then I want people to build like friendships and basically not be lonely, because I do think this is like, we are, not to be too grandiose about it, but like we are at kind of a world historical moment with like the machine in general and people not knowing what to do, and a lot of people like just leaning into techno optimism. So it's just like this is a little niche that needs to, like, it's like a seed that needs to be tended into a larger plant, this community.
Yep. Yeah. I recognize that, and I guess my words for that is like the the priority is about building social fabric, social capital, like just getting people to connect and make meaningful relationships that make a difference in their life in the long term. And that it's like there's assumption that there's enough pre-existing values and like interests in common that you kind of don't have to worry about that stuff will take care of itself. Like people will have
Yes.
ideas, there'll be good conversations, that stuff's fine, but like how do you actually get people to get to know each other in a way that leaves an impact on them in the long term?
That's the big question. And then one other just detail is most of the, I think all of the attendees are either Doomer Optimism listeners or King's North readers. So we
Right,
already, we like already are like values wise on the same page, if that
right,
makes sense.
right, right. I guess one of the lenses that I bring to these things is kind of like one of the consequences of, well, just the moment that we're living in is that people don't know how to be normal.
Mm,
Like no, the definition of normal has really been disintegrating for quite a long time, and everyone's
yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you go to like a rural community where there's very little change and things have been stable for a long time, they know how to be normal. You know, they've
Yeah.
got a sort of um I was in um rural Ireland, and we went to a bar there on a Sunday afternoon when they were like doing their traditional singing and have everyone like getting enrolled in that. And it's like this is the most heartwarming experience that I can imagine. And it's because everyone there knows the rules. Like
Yes.
it's kind of an understood game. It's like you go there on that day because you know the game they're playing and you like that game, and then someone new comes in and they kind of get cajoled into playing too.
Yes.
And I sort of feel like, yeah, this we live in this moment where people kind of don't know what are fun games to play, or like everyone maybe shows up with a different game in mind, and it's kind of hard to coordinate without being bossy or like awkward or risking
Yes.
kind of putting yourself out there.
Yes.
And this thing about, oh, you don't want to over exert yourself or be too controlling, or like I think that urge to be too controlling is like trying to compensate for people not knowing how to just organically have a good time together.
Yeah.
So I mean, one ingredient is about your clarity of intention and like what you're inviting people to, and just letting people know, at the front, being really clear as you open the event, like this is kind of what I want to happen.
Yeah.
And that helps because then they all heard that. They all kind of got permission at some level of like, okay, this is the priority. And if I have to make choices about where to spend my time, I should prioritize the thing that results in the most closeness and friendliness and informality, not I shouldn't be like chasing knowledge or whatever the other things they might be doing.
Yeah.
So getting that clear. I think the other thing is like not just what you say, but then what you demonstrate. There's this like what are you showing as well as what are you telling? Um, and that means that you and anyone else that's in any kind of position of authority or leadership, or like someone that people are looking to, like if you've got a co-hosting team, if they're all uh on the same page with you about what are we really trying to achieve here, I think that really helps as well.
Yeah.
Um, Immediately the little mini concern I guess I have is putting the two galaxy brains on the stage at the start,
Mm.
and sort of because then it's like kind of doesn't matter what you say if the first thing people see is
Paul
the
and Matt.
professional
Yeah.
talkers do their professional talking thing, and
Yeah.
everyone, during that hour, your job is just to listen and be like, wow, these guys are so smart and impressive. That sets the tone. And then like, I mean, if it's only that one, then it's probably fine. If there's that one sort of like keynote moment, it's probably fine. But if there's too much of that, I've seen events where people like, because they are, like you say, some people showing up will be lonely or like in need of more connection. And there's this kind of process going on internally, unconsciously. How do I fit in here? How do I be a good member of this community?
Yes, and intimidated. Like, so this is actually a good thing to flag at the outset because a couple of people who I even know personally who are going, I've said like, think about something, you want to present. Think about something you might want to talk about or share. And they're like, oh my gosh, like how to be smart in front of Paul Kingsnorth and Matthew Crawford. Like what
Yeah.
a huge, it's like, on the one hand, it's like a great opportunity to like get these guys talking and thinking about the things that you're caring about in like a real conversation, as opposed to like the galaxy brain types typically just like, you know, it's usually unidirectional and then maybe there's some comments in their Substack or something that they read occasionally, but it's not like you don't get to have an extended conversation with these types. And so the whole point is like, you know, they're just normal people. You're doing awesome work. We should be able to have a conversation. But there is like a hierarchical, there's a little bit of a mismatch there. So how to like
Yeah.
manage people's fear with that, I don't, that's a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, the game is like get people to relax their defenses and then just start organically connecting with each other, and it's fine. But at the start, if there is this uncertainty about how do I fit in, and the first role model you see is like extremely eloquent, intelligent person holds the interest of the whole room for an hour. It's like, oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? Is that how I'll
Yeah,
fit in here? You know, and it's
yeah,
like, no, we actually, like you're talking about this like timber craftsman. I guess he's probably not a great public speaker. I don't know, but like
yeah, right.
often the people that you most want to hear from are the ones that are gonna feel inhibited in that particular mode. And so it's
Yeah,
like, how do you get people talking to each other in a way that feels natural to them, or like that doesn't feel intimidating?
I know. And then the other thing that I'd be curious your thoughts on, that's kind of related to this question is how to kind of like, what is the best way to get the ice broken?
Yeah,
Because we have only 2 days, and I know it'll be great by like the probably the beginning, middle of the second day, but that first day, like to just really get people like, and it's only 2 days, and therefore the other thing
yeah,
I want to talk about throughout this is to how to coordinate somewhat in advance, so we're not taking too much time just coordinating
yeah,
at the actual event.
yeah. Um, the first answer that came to mind for me was liquor. We spent some we spent some time in the Balkans last summer, and whenever you show up at a new place, the first thing that happens is they rack up some strong alcohol, and like if you have like one shot of like homemade liquor, you're immediately like your defenses drop,
Relaxed.
and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I can just have a conversation. That might not work. I don't know on your
At
crowd.
9 a.m.
Um, we did something. This wasn't my idea, but it worked really well. Um, this is probably also not the right answer, but I'm just saying it because it might trigger some useful thinking.
Yeah.
We did this event about how to be in a leadership position in a more collaborative way, and there's like quite a lot of brainy ideas about how to be a leader.
Yeah.
And we did a bunch of work to like set up. These are all the big questions that people are showing up with. And then someone in the crowd had this idea for an icebreaker, which was we're going to play musical statues and someone is like DJ, and when they stop the music, like you're dancing around, when they stop the music, you pair up with someone, and then you grab one of these brainy questions, and you've got like 2 minutes to talk about the question. And what do
Okay.
you think about it? And then
Yeah.
the DJ starts again, and then you start dancing, and then you meet someone else. And so
Yeah.
it was like silly, lighthearted, but also you're actually getting straight into the juicy
Meat of
content
it.
that
Yeah.
people are arriving with. And you
Yeah.
have all these encounters with someone, and in the space of like 30 minutes, you might meet 6 or 7 people.
Right.
And then one of them, you're like, that person was great. I can't wait to have lunch with them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
something along those kind of lines where it's like, it's
Yeah.
kind of serious enough, but it's also silly enough that people, can be goofy with each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something I want to keep um like basically just keep thinking about what I could potentially suggest, and then the other thing, I'll like reach out with my team and get their vibes and that kind of thing. Like the other thing is my other, so it's me, Patrick, my husband, and our friend Gord, who is like a huge personality, but also kind of nervous.
Mm.
I'm also nervous. Like I'm not like you. I don't know if you're nervous or not, but I'm like nervous to be like I'm in charge here, like I'm setting the tone, I'm an authority of over this event, even though I need to be. And actually, like I just kind of had this moment when this event sold out in an hour that I was like, I think I just need to like stop it with the like modesty stuff. I just need to be like, this is like step into my power kind of moment. Um, So maybe this event will be transformative for me as well in that way, you know?
I mean, you know that you're more normal than lots of people, so you've got that on your side.
That's true.
You have like a faint memory of how to be normal.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I do. And just have fun, like, you know,
Yeah.
and joke around with people and not be so serious and not be so like, yeah, I don't know, buttoned up or
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah. So I mean, like, if, for example, you have you and Patrick on stage at the opening, and you're being like clowning around with each other,
Yeah,
that says something, you
and
know?
he doesn't mind being in front of a group and
Great,
being silly. Yeah.
great. There's these little like minor things that actually have they signal a big impact to people, you know?
Yeah.
I guess the
And
other kind of the general pattern that I have in my head, like the example of the musical statues, is kind of like force people to interact in small groups in a way that is relevant and feels fun. That's kind of the
yes.
mission.
Yes, and okay, so the other thing we should talk about is numbers because we have about 50 people.
Mm, mm.
So when you are thinking about small groups, this is kind of your thing, is maybe for people who haven't heard you speak on this
Yeah,
topic,
yeah,
let's talk about the small group theory again and why, and then maybe I can think about like numbers for that.
yeah. I mean, I'll try not to go on too long about my small group theory because it's kind of the only thing I ever think about and talk about is how small groups solve every problem.
Yeah.
Um, but as it applies to this thing, you've got a group of 50 people in 2 days. That's not really long enough for everyone to get to know everyone. And if you want, like the ideal case is that at the end, people feel delighted and connected and excited to keep doing stuff together and like, wow, I found my people, and that, that kind of nice feeling that you have at the end of a
Yeah.
good event. If they're going to get there, the way they'll get there is they'll have some kind of bonding experience with like 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
And so your objective as an events designer is like, how do I just make it likely that most people find those 3 or 4 connections that really like light them up?
Yeah.
And to me, that's a numbers game. It's like just if you're shy or you're not sure if this is your place or you're still kind of on the fence, a traditional conference will just give you cover the entire time so you can just hide.
There are two people, by the way, who bought tickets who asked for a refund already because they were too like afraid of it being too small and having to talk. I was shocked I'm like, you're gonna get to hang out with Paul Kingsnorth and Matt Crawford, and you're like, I just can't like talk to
Yeah,
people. I'd rather just sit and listen.
yeah. This is
I mean,
this
people
is
do what they want, but yeah, it's just like,
this is the new normal. I have a lot of compassion for that. Like people
yeah,
are socially atrophied, and that's why we need these like kind of potentially awkward prosthetics to like patch up the gaps where our social norms should be.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I cut you off for that. You're still doing
One
small
of
groups.
well, one of the things that we have done in many of our events, not all of them, is um, and I'm just turning it over in my head if I think it's appropriate here or not, but basically you can just assign everyone into a group and say at the start of day one, at the end of day one, the start of day two, and the end of day two, you're going to meet this group and you're going to have 40 minutes together. And there's like one question, there's like the first question when you first meet each other, what brought you here? Okay, easy. First question at the end of the day, what really struck you? And then the third question, what questions are coming up for you? And then the fourth one, what are you going to do about it? Something like that, like just
Yeah,
a, you're like nudging them into go on, have a useful conversation, and
yeah,
you
yeah,
make it
and
small
yeah,
enough that it's not intimidating, like 4 people, 5 people.
yeah. As you were speaking just now, I was thinking, so there are already, so, oh, this is another detail that I didn't share with you that's important, but I sent out a Google form after everybody signed up and said, basically, do you want to speak? Yes or no? If so, share a little blurb about yourself and a link to some of your work. I'll put all of the people who want to speak on one page, on a web page that's only for attendees. And that's as far as I've gotten, but I was thinking simultaneously, I made a group chat of all the people I know on Twitter who are coming. And like in that group chat, there's a like two people who work in construction, a plumber, a mechanic, and this traditional like craftsman, artisan craftsman guy. And they were like, let's do like a workers panel, like a panel about people who work with their hands and like because that's kind of a big theme in Matt Crawford's work. He's like a mechanic, you know, kind of like a craftsman philosopher. And I was just thinking, I wonder whether or not there's some way that the process of co-creating panels or workshops can help sort people because then they like will meet each other in advance by deciding what they have a project to do, which is we're going to fill an hour at this conference and we're going to figure out what we're going to do with that hour. And then they get to know each other in that process. And then when they get there, like maybe there'll be time for like anyone who's meeting or anyone who's presenting, like over this lunch, take the time to meet with your group and like hammer out details or whatever. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, that's really solid. A little project is like an excellent way to connect with people, right?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming like there's not going to really be room for like slaughtering a chicken or like painting a fence. So
No,
like,
but I think like somebody could do like sharpening, you know, knives or, you know, things like that, sharpening a scythe or something like that, you know, like a little workshop where people can do some kind of hands-on thing, you
mm,
know?
mm. Because that, I mean, that is the most normal way to connect is
Yeah.
we're preparing dinner for people or,
Yeah. Well, and the
um,
potluck will be another way for people to
yeah,
connect. And like that's another thing I was thinking about, like I might ask people if they want to be on the dinner team to help with dinner and just to like help coordinate and help make sure like everybody has, you know, everybody's bringing something appropriate and
yeah,
you know, that kind of
yeah,
thing. So it's
yeah.
just like a project. Maybe people who don't want to speak can be, I could ask them if they want to be on the dinner team.
Yeah, people love anyone who's not feeling super comfortable loves having chores because it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm contributing, and then
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about how nervous I am, and then I had a nice
Yeah.
conversation with someone, and then I
Yeah.
relaxed. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it's really good. It's really good. Um, I was just kind of tossing up as you're describing this thing about the panels, about how much to prepare in advance and how much to do spontaneously.
Yeah.
Um, the good thing about preparing is, yeah, it gives a chance for people to coordinate beforehand and start to connect and like tune in with what they want to do and all that. Um, the good thing about doing it spontaneously is you really just have that intuitive, like, what's really alive? What are we excited about? What new connections were sparked this morning that we want to get into this afternoon?
Yeah.
Um, and it is possible to do a kind of hybrid. So like, um, I'm not recommending this, I'm just thinking about it out loud, but something we do sometimes is what we call the parking lot. So that's like anyone who's got an idea for a session they'd want to run or a talk they want to give, we'd get them all like on post-it notes on the wall. And it's not a commitment, it's a like, I'm interested in this, or a maybe, or this is something I've been thinking about and I'm not sure. I need a collaborator or something like that. And you sort of like you're not making a commitment, but you are sort of making yourself visible. Like I've got something maybe.
Mm.
And then so there's this first kind of like harvesting all these ideas, and then there's the second thing of like, what are we actually doing today? And who's committed, who's ready to cross the line and say, yes, I'm going to do this at 3 o'clock in this room. This is the topic, this is what's happening. So there's like
Yeah.
kind of a space between those two phases, and that
Yeah.
you could do the actual agenda setting once each morning. So there's a chance for things to kind of get ripped up and added together and twisted around.
Yeah.
The other important factor here is how many parallel tracks do you imagine happening, which
Well,
depends
that's
on the
the
venue.
thing. Yeah, that's the thing. So basically, we have only this one room in this community theater. It will be late October, so like maybe somebody could do like an hour-long session outside, you know, if it was a small enough group and people were dressed appropriately. Um, you know, if it's not super cold. And um I hadn't really imagined parallel tracks, but I don't really know, like I'm not against it or anything. I was
Mm.
thinking one thing we could do is like for example, Matt Crawford's wife is has this actually really spicy Substack called Submission, and she's like a Shakespeare scholar, but it's like basically about like female the femininity that comes from submitting to a man. And she was like, I want to run a session where I read some passage from Taming of the Shrew and then discuss it. These other guys want to do this like craftsman panel. So I was thinking like we could start to sketch out the schedule with for sure committed things that people know they want to do in
Mm,
advance, but
mm,
leave blocks and then be like, okay, we still have the 2 o'clock hour. You could check in at like lunch on the first day. Like we still have the 2 o'clock hour. You check in at the beginning, like, we still have these spaces. Think about if you want to do something, maybe do the post-it note thing. Check in at lunch. We still have the 2 o'clock hour, like who wants to step up kind of thing. And like we'll pencil you in, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Um, I think for me, it's a pretty significant design decision if things are going to be happening in parallel or not.
Yeah.
Because if I'm thinking about a session with 50 people, that's pretty intimidating, and I'm really gonna have to get my ducks in a row before I commit to doing it. Whereas if I know
Yeah.
there's like three things happening, and my one can be a bit crappy, and it doesn't matter because like people will go to other things if they sound better. It
Yeah.
lowers the barrier to entry a lot.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be good to have at least a couple hours each day that have parallel sessions now that we're talking about
Yeah,
it. For
yeah,
people who want to do something but don't want to be in front of the whole room. You,
exactly.
you know? Yeah.
And
I
again,
always
it's just
worry
it's
I worry though about I know that this has happened before, but like a popularity contest, like what if nobody shows up
yeah,
to your
yeah,
session? And that's something that has happened. So what? Like what do you do? What do you do about that?
yeah. There's a the way you do that is you anticipate it and you let people know ahead of time. This is a dynamic that can happen, and you kind of tell them not to freak out about it.
Yeah.
So there's this guy, Harrison Owen. He's the one that designed what they call open space technology, which is like sort of the original formulation of how you do this co-created agenda. And he stipulated a bunch of like rules and guidelines about how to do it. And one of them is whoever shows up is the right people. And so
Mm.
if that means nobody comes, what that means is people had other priorities, other stuff caught their attention. It's no reflection on you. And if you're excited about the topic, do your session with nobody. Like if
Yeah.
that means you're going to write a blog instead of doing a presentation, that's awesome. That's still a
Yeah.
useful contribution. And it's more about just letting people know this happens, and don't
Freak out
allow
about it. Yeah.
yourself to like freak out and get really anxious about what does it mean. It's just a coordination thing. People went
Yeah.
where they wanted to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Um,
helpful.
the other piece that you can frame as well is, as soon as you get people into a hall, you activate some of their schoolish memories.
Oh my God, yes.
And there's all this conditioning about what you're supposed to do at school. And one of them is you're supposed to go to all your classes. And so like making it really explicit that cutting class is celebrated, and it's good to just skip sessions and grab someone and go for a walk one-on-one. Like that's actually one of the best things you can do.
Yeah.
Um, like taking people on these one-on-one walks is actually, yeah, it's exceptionally good. I think sort of encouraging people to step out of the box and just focus on connecting with the people they're interested in, having the conversations they
Yeah.
want to have. If they look at the agenda and there's four things on and they're all boring, it's like, great, go and do something else or have a nap. Like that is the best thing you could do.
Yeah. 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 That's helpful too. Like, because I think there is this impulse of like attending everything. I thought where you were gonna go with that is also like this is a theater. So
Mm.
speakers are probably gonna be up on the stage. Not that we can't like use different parts of the theater and maybe like set it up differently, but um yeah, like not when you said school impulse, I was thinking like not wanting to talk out of turn, when not having it be like convivial. Not that, if somebody's giving like a 10-minute talk, obviously you're not trying to like interrupt them, but um to encourage conversation and dynamic events. And then the other thing that I wanted to pick your brain about is like how to encourage those who are proposing panels, workshops, talks, like from not immediately falling into like academic style
Yeah.
talk and answer. I don't know, like ideas for more dynamic conversations. Like, obviously, on the one hand, you do need like a set amount of time just to introduce yourself and the idea that you're trying to get across.
Yeah.
But then, like at the Wagon Box event, it was fine, but it was like there were a couple of events or sessions that were like 15-minute talk, 15-minute talk, 15-minute talk, conversation, end of session. And part of that was just because so many people were so excited to talk. Like, we was literally just like, here, you have a 15-minute slot, and everyone was very glad to, and everyone's talks were like not boring at all. But it was still that kind of academic format, and I'm like, what other formats are there that we could
Yeah.
be encouraging people to think about?
Yeah. I think it really helps if you can have like a 1-page list of suggestions that you send to all
Mm,
the presenters and say like, these are some ways that you can interrupt the format of just doing broadcast.
mm,
Um, there's a website called Liberating Structures, and the whole point of that website is collecting these different patterns that you can use. And it's all about, you just want to basically increase the amount of participation that you're getting instead of it just being listening, that you
yeah.
can also have some kind of interaction process. So like one of the examples, they have this thing called 1, 2, 4, all. So that's like, um, you would start, you're the presenter and you'd say like, hey, there's this really crucial question that I've been dedicating my life to, and it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to give you all 1 minute to think about your response to that question. So that's the one. And then there's the two, which is, and now after that 1 minute of silence, talk to the person next to you and just like compare notes. What did you come up with? And you've got 2 minutes to do that. And then the four is, okay, two of those pairs get together and just talk for 4 minutes about what you came up with, compare and contrast, like, and then if you want to go to the next stage, which is the all, so 1, 2, 4, all, is
Mm,
like, as the presenter, you just call from the different groups of four. What did you hear? That was awesome. What's interesting?
yep.
You know, simple stuff like that that just gets people engaged, talking to each other, thinking about the topic. And then you do your lecture and you've got like a much more like a live room than if you're
Yeah.
just like, here's the thing that I care about, and I'm just gonna like bombard you with facts and ideas.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And then that's great because I think part of it too is there's always like the people who are the first kids in school to raise their hand who
Yeah.
like which is
Yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
But it's like, so I have empathy for those people because they're like, oh, I just have so many things to say. But you know, making sure other people get a chance to like just literally use their voice and be asked what they think.
exactly.
And then like, yeah, I think part of it is sometimes in these like academic dynamics, but especially around like a galaxy brain thinker, people are really intimidated to like come up with the most, I
Yeah,
don't know, clever thing
yeah,
to say as opposed to potentially the most alive or, you know, deep or whatever. They just want, there's kind of like a cleverness contest. And so
yeah.
I think any way to like interrupt that dynamic is helpful.
Yeah. One that's really golden is, yeah, you give people some little interaction time, and then when you're like hearing back from the room, instead of who has the cleverest thing to say, you ask, what's one thing you heard someone say that really struck you?
Mm,
And so then your job is not who's the cleverest, it's who listened for the thing that really felt resonant.
yes.
And that like
And then,
flips the dynamic on its head.
yeah, and then you're asking not for the person's cleverest thing, but they're complimenting someone in their group.
Yeah.
Which yeah, that's really great. Yeah. Okay, so back to some of the practical realities. So I'm collecting these bios of people. They're all super interesting people. Um, Not just talks, but I had said like something like go on a walk
Hmm.
with the group. Like that's
Hmm.
what we can do for an hour. Like
Hmm.
maybe after lunch at 2 o'clock, you want to come back here. Like, you know, John is gonna run a walk and maybe there's like a guided question to the walk and everyone walking along is thinking about and discussing this question and then we get back at the end and there's some sort of discussion, whatever it is, you know, after the walk. Um, so giving people that list would be the next step after everybody's on the website. And then like just practically, I guess, you know, you've used like Discord in the past. I don't know what this population's horrible because they're just a bunch of Luddites. So
Yeah.
you can they could just email one another if they like, you know, see people in that they're interested in. But yeah, just thoughts about like
Yeah.
practically. how to
Yeah.
get them
I
coordinating.
I think the best, all of the options are bad. Um, and even if people are not Luddites, like I work with techie people, and it's still the coordination. Like everyone's got different opinions about what software they prefer and everything, and it's always pain.
Yeah.
Um, one of the best things we've done is like using a Google Slides template where everyone has one page. So
Oh,
that instead
nice.
of you having to make the website, it's like all you've done is you've put everyone's name on one slide, and it's like there's a place where they can put their photo, there's a space where they can say a few things about what they're interested in talking about, and there's a space where they can say how to contact me. And so if people
Yeah.
want to text or call or like email or get me on Twitter, they can just choose whatever contact form, mode works for them.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good.
for a lot for lots of people, that's not too annoying to figure out how to do. They, like drag and drop an image and put some text in is like kind of okay. But I just don't count on anyone. It doesn't matter what solution you come up with, you just don't expect that everyone's going to buy into it.
Yeah. So if I'm assuming a lot of people won't coordinate, but a few will, if they do coordinate in advance, like let's just say, Maryland's Shakespeare session and then the craftsman session, I get in touch with that group and say like, do you guys want to do a panel? If so, I'll put you at this time. I'll give you an hour, like just confirm with me, give me a title for your session, whatever. Um, I just say that to whoever wants to coordinate in advance, and then anything that's not yet coordinated in advance, we do on site,
Mm,
right?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess if it was me in that position, I would have like, yeah, I would be using something like Google Docs, like something cloud-based that is constantly being updated. And you can have an area which is like, this is a list of ideas that I've heard about that are not confirmed. And this is the actual agenda where there are blocks that we know this is happening, where you've sort of like put it in ink, as it were. Um,
Yep,
and share that on the Discord a few times and be like, okay, look at this. We're half
yep,
full on day one. And if you've got
yep,
ideas, you should put them here. Like that sort of thing where they can kind of see you working it out loud. And it kind of, again, like lowers the threshold a little bit of participating.
yep, yep, yeah. I like that. We could do like some kind of virtual way to put like the post-it notes of ideas
Yeah.
that are just
Yeah.
like forming but not confirmed, I think might be helpful because even beyond just listing people's like work and bios, it's not really clear necessarily what specifically about their work they would want to talk about at this conference. So having that as a like a sticky note, like I would love to discuss anything related to X, Y, and Z, or I could do a workshop or,
Yeah.
run a
Yeah.
panel. At the Wyoming event, this spontaneous panel formed, which I don't even know if they know, I called them the witchy women. It was like all women who all do like wild crafting and
Mm,
like herbal remedies and stuff. And they just like discussed that. And it was like a conversation too, which was so
mm,
cool. But that was like spontaneous. It was just kind of like we were having a lot of conversations from like kind of galaxy brain, people who have been in like presidential administrations and like, and then it was like, all right, let's mix this up a bit. And there was like, and Paul McNeil was like, let's get these like herbalist women up there. I'm like, this is great. I love it. But making space for those kinds of things, like it's so stressful as the event coordinator though, but it's like,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just worth it.
The other thing that I would do from a technology point of view is, yeah, really don't count on much asynchronous collaboration, but lots of people feel good in the synchronous mode. Like basically, if you put them on Zoom, and you have some, like I'm thinking about an orientation session a week before the event or something, or 2 weeks
Mm,
before the event.
mm.
Maybe even having two of them. There's a Monday morning one and a Thursday afternoon one or something like that, so people can kind of cluster and they just get a chance to like start provoking the questions that they might be bringing or what they're excited about, or like
I know, and
put them in a
like
breakout group and meet someone.
I know because like it is so hard to even put yourself in the mental headspace of the event until you get there
Mhm.
sometimes. Like people are just so busy, they're like, I just want to go to this thing, but like I don't know like enough what it's about to like commit to something in advance.
Yeah.
So maybe we will just actually take some time in the morning of the first day and kind of just like talk about the process of co-creation, Like, even if it's just an hour-long thing where it's like, you know, these are the things we already have, here's what the process will be. Put these sticky notes up, proposing a session, we can confirm them later on, we'll check back in with everyone. The more I think about it, I'm assuming most people will not coordinate in advance. However, having said that, we have a lot of people who are like very like professional speak. We have like at least, I don't know, 6 or 8 people who are coming who are like who like get invited to keynote things besides Paul and Matt. So I'm sure that there's going to be people among that set who will have something in mind, will want to speak. So we can fill out the schedule with those people, but I just want to make sure that the attendees who aren't well-known keynote speakers feel like,
Exactly.
make sure it's balanced where they feel like, you know, they're able to contribute, like you said.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, it's
We
just as you're saying that, I'm like, it's good to have people who are confident speakers that can get up and just, you know, make a contribution by having some cool things to say.
Yeah,
And then I think it needs to be balanced out by having some other people there that are confident to activate everyone else and facilitate
yep,
everyone else, and that you can kind of have a hybrid where there's some more presentation mode and there's some more facilitated mode, and that
yep.
someone, yeah, that you've got 1 or 2 people that you just know can bring questions or activities or like ways of collaborating that anyone feels comfortable to participate in,
Yeah, and
and
I
that like
also
lowers
wonder,
the hierarchy thing.
yes, and I also wonder whether or not we could do a kind of hybrid where the Galaxy Brains are put on stage, and not just Matt and Paul, but there's a bunch of like, you know, the other ones. But then instead of it being like a one-way talk, you make them in conversation with maybe a host and the audience, where like there's a facilitation of broader conversation with this person, because it's a small enough group. It's not like, you know, 250 people. It's, you know,
Yeah,
it's only 50
yeah,
people. Not everyone will come to every session. To just like make it a conversation, I feel like is so much more interesting and dynamic typically than like a one-way talk from this guy who a lot of these guys have like their shtick of things they talk about. It's all recorded online. We know what this guy thinks about stuff. We don't need to
mm,
hear him give the same talk again. Like, now let's have a dynamic conversation and like push his thinking or her thinking in a direction by being forced to interact, I think is
yeah.
good.
I just had a brainwave of like a format that works sometimes in the right context, which is called the fishbowl. And it's like you have a few people talking to each other. So maybe it's yeah, the 2 authors and maybe 1 other host or something. They're having a conversation. And then you have a ring around them of people who have like a dedicated listening role. And there might even be a fun way to sort of like elect people into that role. It's like, who do you want to, yeah, choose, you know, in every little group of 4, you've got to choose 1 person to take that seat or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, yeah, the people in the middle, they talk for half an hour, and then the conversation switches and you go to the outer ring and you say, what are you noticing? What sense are you making of this? Like, where are the gaps in the story that everyone's telling? And you sort of like flip the attention off the galaxy brains onto them, like, yeah, the normal people, you know,
Yes. I
the
love
witchy
that. And
women.
yeah, the witchy women. Yeah. I love that too, because in a lot of ways these people are coming to engage with these ideas that they're super drawn to. Like, you know, a lot King's North has and specifically has a lot of really dedicated readers. But I'm assuming some people, like you were saying, like who the craftsman is not probably somebody who like is practiced at keynote speeches, would want to contribute and want to be heard, and you know that would be a good format instead of like necessarily hosting a session, unless it's, you know, some kind of practical session of like
Yeah,
sharpening a chainsaw or something.
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. That could be a great, we could do multiple versions of that, because there is one thing that happened at the Wyoming event is that like over 80% of the attendees were people who speak a lot. They're all like the podcast, as my one friend likes to say.
yeah,
So that was kind of tough because everybody wanted to speak and everyone's used to being the one person who's invited to speak. Whereas this one is gonna be like maybe 20% of that group and then 80% of
Mhm.
just like listeners, who might not, have a platform other than, their work or whatever. So yeah, that'll be a different dynamic. And I just wanna make sure if people want some opportunity to engage, they'll be given multiple ways to do so and not just like sit passively and feel like no one's listening to me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Putting people together in small groups, like check-in groups, um, randomness of the universe or try to
I would do the orchestrated chaos method, which is where you are the puppet master and you know when you look at this list of 50 people, there's like you have a bunch of information about them, and some of them are basically strangers, and some of them you know very well. And if you were going to do 10 groups of 5, for example,
yeah.
I would distribute who are the who are the 10 people on this list that I trust the most to like hold down the vibe, and we'll put
Mm,
one of those in each group. And
mm,
then do I know that each of them knows one person? Okay, put them with them. And then who are
yep,
the people who have the least connection, distribute them around. So like
yes,
you kind of do a little puppet mastery thing like that. And there's a
yeah.
lot of randomness because there's all this information you don't have.
No, I know, and you don't know, like, these craftsmen people, let's put them all together, but you don't know if they're gonna like butt heads or,
Yeah.
whatever else, if they're gonna get
Yeah.
along or not. Yeah.
Or you can do full, yeah, you can do full chaos mode as well, which is just, you have some kind of icebreaker which gets people moving through the space according to some random principles, and then you say stop, and the people that are closest to you, that's your group.
Yeah.
Um, the good thing about that method is that um, it kind of feels fair. Like nobody has any questions about why am I in this
Yeah.
group and not in that group? It's like
Yeah,
because you
right.
just were there. So that's an easy one.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I'll think about that.
We did one. I went to someone else's conference and they got us. They said your job is to rotate your chairs and sit in a triangle so your knees are uncomfortably close to each other. Like you need to be awkwardly close to each other. And so we had this like silly little
yeah.
awkward like and then suddenly there's 2 people and that's your little triad. And that was our group for the day, and you had to meet them a couple of times. And like so simple things like that I think can work.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, speaking of this, what were you thinking about lunch?
Oh, um that it can be really annoying. Like for example, if you had a bunch of food trucks out the front, then it's really easy, and people are like, "Oh, there's 4 different things to choose from," and I go when I'm ready, and
Oh, you know what? Wait, this is actually important for context. There is it's a small town that's walkable to
okay,
this community theaters in like this small, it's like, 4 streets, and there's a main street and there's like 2 restaurants and a bar downtown. So
yeah,
people can go out to eat together, or they could pack, lunch meat and go into various like Airbnbs or whatever place they're staying and make a little lunch. But like, is there a way for me to suggest using that time
yeah,
other than just like feeding yourself, but maybe as
yeah,
a way to,
yeah. It might be worth having a conversation with the restaurants in town, and like, because you could, for example, book a couple of tables and
yep,
say there's like a sign up sheet or something on the Monday morning or whatever, and it's like, hey, there's table 1, 2, and 3 at this restaurant, and just put your name on, and then those will be your table buddies. You know what I
oh
mean? Like,
yeah,
just do something to like lower the coordination cost, so it's really easy, and
yeah,
it's
because I
likely
can
that people are going to
feel,
meet someone new.
yeah, that can feel like I went to this conference recently, and like the activation energy of like asking a group to lunch is
Yeah,
very takes
yeah,
and this is me as who's like quite
yeah, yeah,
outgoing,
yeah.
like
And and
who
and the
wants to
difference
go,
between
you know?
the difference between having a table of 4 or 5 people and a table of 15,
Yeah,
like the 4 or 5 is going to be infinitely more interesting than the 15
yes,
table. So if you
yes,
can kind of like force that a little bit,
yes, that's smart. That's smart. Yeah. Um, yeah. And then like this, my other friend was Katura was saying like, I can also like have sandwiches ready at one place. If that group wants to just like come have sandwiches, they can
Yeah.
come over to like a house, which is a more informal setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, so I'm like, it's really just like design issues and practical issues that I need to think specifically about. But it does also seem like me as a event designer in this capacity, have to step into my power a bit. I need to channel my inner Rich.
What reservations do you have about that?
I think just like I'm a very like libertarian party planner in the sense of like people will if people are motivated enough, they'll make happen what they want to have happen kind of thing. Oh, it's like, and the flip side of that is I don't want to be too controlling and make it like my vibe that doesn't maybe
Yeah.
necessarily match their vibe and they wanted to do something different. And like there were enough, the thing is at the Wyoming event, there were so many charismatic and extremely agentic people there that there was no issue at all with that. It was like Paul McNeil's like, we're going to the stream. Who's coming? It's 8 a.m. cold plunge. And it was just like, now there's just like 6 dudes out there and I'm like sitting there having my coffee and they're like running outside in the snow and in their underwear. And you know, so there's like enough people who had like tons of energy to like do stuff. And James Poga's like, let's go trout fishing, like who wants to go trout
Mm,
fishing, like there's
mm,
all this like fun stuff going on. I'm sure there'll be I don't know this group as much as I know the, you know, there's a lot of people attending this upcoming event who I don't know at all. And so I want to respect the potential for like their quirkiness to come out and their
mhm.
without being too top down. But then I don't want it to be like boring because I didn't like exercise enough control. So it's a
Yeah.
real tricky
Yeah.
balance, you know?
Yeah. That's exactly the thing. Like this example of 15 people going to lunch together because it's just the kind of easy way to coordinate. And like one or two people spend most of the time doing most of the talking, and like 10 people are not really satisfied with that, but
Yeah.
they don't really feel the confidence to do anything about it. Like to me, that's pretty common experience of conferences. And sure that maybe you just accept that's what it's like, but I would prefer, I always want to like disturb that dynamic and make it easy for people to get to the outcome they want.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, one thing that immediately comes to mind is to be as transparent about this as you feel comfortable doing so, like letting people know this is what I'm trying to achieve.
Well,
I've got these proposals.
I'm sending this podcast to everybody, by the way.
Great, great,
So yeah,
nice,
so they're gonna
nice.
see
Yeah,
that like if they listen to it, they're gonna see like what we're talking about and what my intentions are. So hopefully
yeah, great.
that'll strike, you know, something in them and then they can, you know, if you're listening and you're an attendee of this event, like reach out to me, give me your ideas, you know, we can
Yeah,
coordinate via email. A couple of people have already said like, how do I do a session? I want to do something on this. If I get a bunch of emails from people and that's the easiest way to coordinate, I could be like, you two obviously need to talk to one another and I can put people together.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, knowing you, the only chance of you like doing the sort of top-down overbearing thing is if you're like super stressed. And in that case, you just need some extra helpers. And so you can just name, talk to Patrick, talk to one or two
Yeah.
other people and just be like, hey, if I'm getting stressed, can you come and tell me to chill the fuck out and
Yes.
help out?
Yeah. Well, and Gord and Pat are both like super charismatic and fun. And so like I told both of them I'm gonna do a bunch of the coordinating in advance, but then when I'm there, they should be like I'll like I want to enjoy the talks. I want to like also
Mhm.
relax and have like a good times. So they're gonna be like my vibe setters, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, so will Matt and Paul, who are both very you know, easy to talk to, very charismatic. But yeah, yeah,
That's the other thought I had with Matt and Paul is like, is there a way to provoke them to, what's the word, like subvert their own authority as a like famous speaker? Like, is it satisfying for them to always be the galaxy brain where it's like everyone's listening and you're talking? Or do you want to try something different with this one? Like,
Well, this is a question we can talk about right now because basically all Paul said to me is he's the one who reached out to me. He said, I just want to meet Matt Crawford. I'm in the United States for two talks, two like big audiences that are
mm,
formal talks and like somewhat intimidating and very buttoned up. I want this event to be less formal, less
mm,
preparation,
mm-hmm,
more fun, more spontaneous. And so we don't have to do the bookended interviews. That was just the first thing that came to mind, but you and I can discuss like the one hand you want to people have come to this event because they want to hear Paul and Matt speak to one another. And that is actually like, I think back to these old like 1960s talk show interviews with like Dali, Salvador Dali on like a American talk show, and you're like getting this galaxy brain in a moment in history
mm,
in an interview conversation, and you just like get to see this person like and these two people meeting each other for the first time like publicly. So there is some merit to that.
mm-hmm.
Um but even throughout, like maybe we do the two bookended conversations, and then throughout, like you use Paul and Matt in different ways, not just maybe as listeners, but as contributors somehow. I don't know what you think.
Yeah. I get that, and that there's little subtle framing things you can do, like the way you set them up on stage. If there's a cup of tea and it's like cozy versus if
Yeah.
they're at a lectern, that sort of like changes the dynamic. Um, the other thought that I had was we've done sometimes you have some keynote speakers and some keynote listeners, and the keynote listener's job is to basically like go to lots of sessions and pay attention to like where does it really feel the most juicy, what are the questions that are most alive, what
Hmm.
ideas feel new, and then you give them the spotlight at the end of the event and you say like, so what did you hear, what did you notice, like
Oh, I love that.
what's happening here, and whether that's Paul and Matthew or it's anyone, any of the participants that are showing up, like giving them that
Yeah.
role is cool. But yeah, I get what you mean, like that they, if it's really clear for everyone that they're not supposed to be doing a very formal, like it's not a lecture, it's a conversation, like if you can really
Yeah.
get that tone set right, then I don't think you have that much to worry about.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, I think a conversation is nice. Like they don't have to prepare much. We can just, toss them a series of questions like, why did you want to meet each other? Where do you see the overlap in your work? Like, what are some of the most important themes you'd like to discuss this weekend and like see discussed from people? And then at the end, it was cool. We had Kings North speak at the end of the Wyoming event, and hearing him as a British guy who hadn't been in the US since like 2008
Mm,
or something,
mm,
reflect on what he was seeing there. It was really fun, and like it made a group cohesion happens almost because you have like this outsider describing your group back to you,
mhm,
which I think is really fun. So it would be cool to have Paul and Matt like reflect on what they've seen, and that can kind of like cement a group identity somewhat.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's exciting actually.
Yeah. Like
You
Kings
do
North,
need that external reflection to kind of see
I
where you're at.
know, I know. And the whole time I think a lot of people as we're going along, we're thinking like, what's Kings North thinking? Like, we're so weird. We're such a and like the funny thing about the Wyoming event is it was so wild because Paul McNeil, whose place we stayed at the Wagon Box, was the one who got Kings North to come. He had like a connection through a friend, family friend. And Kings North did not even know like how he was getting there. He's there with his family, how he was getting there, who was going to be at the event, what the event was. So we like get there, and I'm like scrambling to put together like a list of some of the people who are there and like just to give to him because I thought like Paul was communicating, Paul McNeil, to Paul Kingsnorth the whole time, but he wasn't. So it was like
Ah,
this amazing like um he had no idea what he was in for, but was just totally open to it, which was so fun. And then at the end he was like, whoa, this is like, I don't know, like a different vision of America than what I
mm,
like had in my head of like, globalization and like big cars, and it's like there's something here and like that's bringing out this like American ethos that's different than what I thought. And there was also a couple of jokes like some of the people there were like conservative thinkers who are basically environmentalist, but they're considered like conservatives now, at least with the way the environmentalist movement has become. And Kingsnorth made this joke in the middle of one of these talks, like, wow, I'm so glad the conservatives have caught up to like 1970s environmentalism. And it was just like, perfect, and it was like, yeah. So I think that like this interaction is a very fun and alive way to use these like what would be somewhat intimidating authors,
Mm,
in
mm.
which can be like somewhat hierarchical dynamic. Um, yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting excited with all of my opinions about the US and about the Doomer Optimist crowd, but I think that's not what I've been invited here for.
You're gonna have to come and tell us to our faces.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I think it'll be good. Oh, and then the other thing I guess I should just flag for you, and just something that I've been like just concerned with is,
Mm,
okay, we said this at the beginning. People don't know how to be normal, and by that we mean like know what the social norms are, because we're all from different backgrounds, and so there aren't actually set social norms. However, among the like academic conference going set, there are social norms for that group. But there's a whole contingent of people coming who are craftsmen.
mhm,
Gord is a trucker. We've got mechanics, plumbers. And so, I come from a working class background. Some of these people are like coming with their dads who are like, old school mechanic, I want to make sure that it's like, we've talked about this already, but I just want to like bring it up again.
mhm,
These guys don't feel intimidated or that
mhm.
like less than, or like the format such that it's obvious they're not like um experts enough to speak kind of subtext,
Yep, 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 yep. And you actually have to be particularly careful with the British ones because of the class dynamic. They're the worst. They're the worst. Speaking as another working class person,
Yeah.
uh, um, yeah, I think if the first thing that comes to mind for me is like if you can get like food and family, the great levelers, like if you can get
Mm,
people connecting over food and you get people talking about their families,
mm,
like you know, I don't know if this is going to be too corny, but like if you can kind of pitch it right for the potluck, sometimes we'll do something like a conversation menu, or like there's kind of like questions or cards or like some kind of prompts about what are some interesting things to talk about.
yeah.
And if you can use those questions to get people talking about their families, or like,
Mm,
for example, the first thing that popped in my head was, um, because we don't have these shared social norms, what does hospitality mean where you come from?
mm,
This kind of thing of like talking about your heritage, where you come from, who are your people, what are your norms? Like everyone has permission to talk about that. No one's going to be right. It's all going to be interesting. You get to like reveal a little bit about yourself.
mm.
There's kind of questions like that I think that just like really level the playing field and
Yep.
give everyone a chance to be equals.
Yep. Yep. Um, I was gonna just, I remembered at the Wyoming event, the last dinner, spontaneously, this was so, like I told you, there's so many agentic people at that event, so it was delightful, but spontaneously people started giving toasts on that last
Sweet.
event. It
Sweet.
was so good. And so like we're eating dinner for like an hour, and like 45 minutes of it was toasts. And it was like there was the happy hour debate right before that dinner. And then it was like a giant roast, and everyone's like eating this giant roast together. And then it was like one person after another standing up and like, oh, this is a toast to all the moms. Like, this is a toast to all the dads.
Yeah, that's great.
It was so fun. Like, I
I
think about
mean,
those kinds of things, and sometimes it's like spontaneous. You can't really build it in. Like, it's just
yeah,
everyone's got that
yeah,
convivial
yeah,
atmosphere, and it's just going to
yeah.
happen. But I remember before the toast started, James Pogue's girlfriend is like the sweetest little thing, and she comes up to me and she's like, we need to do toasts, and it was her idea. And she was like, that's just like gonna cap off this event the best way. And so I'm like telling James, like, James, stand up, do the first toast. And he's like, no, I don't want to. And somebody stood up and did it. I don't know if it was Patrick or who started it. And then it was just like a spontaneous thing that went on for 45 minutes.
That's great.
It
I
was
mean, the
so
thing that
fun.
I noticed in that story was it came after happy hour,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Like alcohol is the great leveler.
I know. And I actually need to think about this with this event because we have just this community theater. We don't have a bar like we have in the
Mm.
Wagon Box event. We are going to go back to one of the rented houses to do the potluck, so we could just bring wine or beer or whatever
Yeah.
to hang out. But I just do need to think about the details of all these things, and then um I have to have my friend Gord, who lives in New York, check out if there's a bar in town for people to go after hours. Because at the Wyoming event there were some people up until like 2 or 3 or whatever, but
This
it's a
is
different.
another norm from the academic circuit, as you're supposed to stay up late drinking too much and doing
Yeah,
regrettable things.
yes. And people brought out like their mandolins and were like playing late
Ah,
into the
sweet.
night. It was really fun. Yeah, so I like that Wyoming event went super well, but it wasn't necessarily all from my design. So
Yeah.
I want to just like make it possible for those kinds of things to spontaneously happen without forcing it too much. But some of the same people are coming, so it can
Yeah.
happen.
Yep. Um, I think my sort of like meta advice for all of this stuff is like the more clear that you can be on your intention, like what are you trying to create, what are you inviting people into, and then the more you can get rid of any sources of stress and anxiety and just show up on the day excited and happy and like get the helpers you need and get the systems in place so things are smooth and easy. And then it's like, and then strip away as much structure and agenda as possible until you're like
I know,
satisfied that
what
it's
is
enough.
that though? You're like, make all the structure make as much structure as possible and then strip it all away.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about minimum viable structure.
Yeah,
And so, for
yeah,
example, double the length of your lunch break because lunch is going to be more interesting than most of the talks.
right. Yep, yep. I haven't even like, here's another thing, hour-long sessions, breaks in
Mm,
between, like what do you think on timing of these things? Because I'm not tied to anything in terms of
yeah.
schedule, but I want it to be enough that there's like people feel like they're coming there and they're getting like some, it seems like bad, and I don't know, sacrilegious to call it content, but like they're getting some
Hmm.
substance,
Hmm.
but then they're also getting like the more informal, which is often more meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. I would be looking at like take the time it takes to set things up properly and have a sense of orientation and connection and settled and welcome and we know what we're doing and I have met a few people already and my voice has been heard.
Yep,
Um, which is separate from here's some of the content, it's sort of like context setting, what they call
yep,
container building, like build that sense of connection and then do some content. Um, and then do the co-created agenda stuff, and then you're doing a closure. So like if you think about those are the main chunks, how long do
yep.
you need for each one of those? And yeah, leave ample breaks because breaks are great. People know how to spend their breaks well. That's easy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good. And an hour-long sessions, you
Well,
like?
I'm sort of like just drawing these
It
big boxes
depends.
in my head. Yeah, like how long
Yeah,
does it take to do that stuff?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
hour, hour and a half, sort of. Yeah, depends.
yeah, yeah. Okay. This is good. Do you have any other like just meta advice? Obviously, I think probably me um between now and October's like stepping into my leadership role, um because obviously like there's a group here that wants to come to be formed and
Hmm.
I have been asked to form it
Hmm.
by God or whomever. um so stepping into that and being like an excited disciple, I guess,
Hmm.
is probably part of my mission between now and October.
Yeah.
And so that I can have fun and be like a, a happy, not a tortured disciple.
Yeah.
Anything else, like not just for this event, but also like part of your philosophy that maybe we didn't yet touch on that would be helpful guidance for me as I keep developing this?
Yeah, just more on that, this inner conflict that you're describing. I think that's what I'm saying when I say getting this clarity of intention. It's
Mhm.
about understanding the trade-offs in your mind as you're thinking about, oh, if I do it this way, it'll be too much of this or not enough of that. And really like spending some time to zoom into that. Like for me, I'd do it with my journal or I'd do it with some friends, like talk it out loud, turn it over and really get clear, like what are the principles that are at stake here and like what's important to me and what am I worried about? And okay, so how am I going to make sure that that doesn't happen? And
Yeah,
if it's this little ball of anxiety and these like unspoken assumptions and like it's kind of messy and hard to work with, but if I can zoom in and like unpack it a bit and get more clear on that,
yeah.
um, and that is going to come up in the micro design decisions about
I
do
know.
we do
I was
this or do we do
actually
that?
thinking about that because, like, for example, Gord is like, oh, I wanna make sure I like make coffee for everyone. Like I want everyone to like have coffee together. And I was just thinking like, okay, like how do we practically do that? Like, and does that feel right? And is this like how we want to use time? And like how, thinking about those micro design decisions really like does force clarity on
Hmm.
what are you trying to
Hmm.
make happen. So I think as I go through this and like literally just start writing out the schedule and sketching out, like we did in Wyoming, I was like, let's do like this talk like late on this afternoon because it's going to really jazz everybody up, even though they'll probably be like tired in the afternoon, but it's like a really cool and exciting talk and like big name people all together. So like that kind of thing where I'm like curating the vibes in ways I am really thinking deeply about that maybe other people wouldn't be or wouldn't be able to see those things.
Yeah,
Um, it happens in the actual process of sitting down and writing it out and designing the thing.
yeah, yeah. The other thing is, it's easier for you to stand in your power when you know you've got a clear mandate from the group.
Mm,
And this is another thing, we don't have the norms because it's not a group yet. So they haven't had a
yep.
chance to say, we empower you. They did by all enthusiastically buying a ticket within an hour. So that's
Yeah.
one really good sign that they trust
Yeah.
you and they're responding to your invitation. It's not just the speakers, it's also that you're involved. Um, but if, like in the communities where I've been around for a long time, we've established some norms of leadership where it's like, when it's my turn, you play my game. I'm bringing a game and you're going to play it. And at the end, you tell me how to do it better next time. But
Yeah.
like while I'm holding the game, we're doing it my way. And we
Yeah.
just know that like it's 2 days, right? Like it's a small little thing.
Yeah.
And I would say like people that are coming, if there's anyone that has like really strong feelings and opinions about how things should be done, let you know about that beforehand and you can integrate it. And afterwards, make sure there's a clean way for people to give you feedback. But during, it's like just get out of the way and let you do your thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, there is like a very lefty side of me that I need to suppress, which is like this tyranny of consensus, like, oh, everybody's voice matters, and like so then it just becomes this like invitation to come up with something to complain about, as
Yeah,
opposed to like, no, this is what the event is. Like after it sold out super fast, people were like, can you expand about? I'm like, I'm not expanding it. I
yeah,
have this event in mind. It's not going to get any bigger than this. This is already at the max of what it's going to be. It's not going to be every
yeah,
other 200-person event where it's not going to be that. I don't want it to be. I don't care if I could make money or give money to all these different speakers in order to do it. It's not what I'm motivated by. I'm not going to do that. And so I've already like put my foot down. I'm like going to keep, I think it's good to just like, that's what I mean partially when I mean step into my power, like
yeah,
not invite people to just like complain, but like
yeah,
we're co-creating it based on these rules. Come play the game. Let me know afterwards what you liked and didn't like, but like, these are the parameters. I'm setting them. You're welcome to come and let me know what you're looking for and what I can help with. But then like once we're doing it, this is what we're doing. Like
yeah,
expressing that
yeah.
energy is good.
And I mean, I do really have this. sense that like you specifically are in touch with something, like you can feel something that's emerging and wants to exist, and you've got the discernment to know that it should be 50 people and not 500, and a bunch of other little details that are just clear to you for some reason, and you might not be able to explain why, but it's just obvious that this is what needs to happen.
Yeah,
And no one else is in that position that has the same
I know. And so
clarity.
I need to not be like so self-effacing about it. It's
Yeah,
like I know what this is. I also like know what ties a lot of you together and that you need to know each other and like
yeah,
that probably good things will come if you know each other in a particular kind of way where it's like um I find like part of my intention is to make these types of relationships, which I think are this is a very sociologically nerdy about of me, but like the strength of weak ties is a this Granovetter article that was really important and influential, but basically like these informal friendships that aren't necessarily like your best friend in the world, but it's like, oh my gosh, this guy I met at this conference, this just
hmm
happened yesterday. I met this guy at this conference in Wyoming who has this classical boys school in Virginia. A friend of mine wants to open a classical girls school. I'm like, you two need to know each other. You have to meet, like it's so these weak ties that like they end up turning into a lot of connections and then those network effects really grow out. But like I can see I'm like a very connecting the dots between people and ideas type. And so I can see like what draws all these people together. I might even be like force myself, even though I'm nervous to be the keynote listener
yeah,
or one of them who's
yeah,
just like, I see, this is what I see the connection between these things is. And then that just clarifies things for people. Like, oh yeah, yeah, we have this in common. Like we are on the same team with this thing. Um, so like that's the stepping into my power in that sense is like partially what I mean. Just
yeah.
speaking from
Um,
authority, you know?
yeah, exactly. And without knowing anything about the guest list, I know that at least 90% of them will be excited to go with the thing that you want to do. That's why they signed up.
Yeah,
But there might be one or two that are kind of like arrogant pricks and they're going to push back,
yeah,
and they're used to, doing things a different way and they think they're right. And it's that when you get that pushback, like that's the critical moment. And if it's me, I would always have a co-host or someone that I can check in with. So like Patrick's the obvious one that comes to mind. And
yeah,
you'd be
and
like, can you
Gord
just
too.
sanity check me here? Like, should we just do it my way, or is this guy being a prick, or like,
Yeah,
am I
yeah.
missing
Well,
something important?
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's like when you say that, I just think like both Patrick and Gord are we all grew up in, working class settings, so it would be like a real trad moment of like loyalty and protection if
Yeah,
somebody was being a dick, it would just be like, dude, stop. Um, which is great. And I feel very confident about that, like being able to rely on those guys for help. But like, yeah, like I said at the beginning, this is I don't know, it's like kind of a watershed moment in history. And then like these two guys thinking on these parallel tracks, like Matt Crawford is basically like in this lineage of this Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. He just like this whole subculture in the US. Kings North is like that in the UK, and like having them meet each other, but then all these other people who are attending like not only get to witness the meeting but like participate in it. It's like it's a hugely cool
yeah,
thing. I don't think anyone's going to be upset by it. I'm completely even amazed that I'm doing it.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So it's good. I think it's
yeah.
going to be great. I just want to make sure that I'm literally designing everything super intentionally so that it's as good as it can be.
I'm just gonna do a little podcast moment where I tell you about some theory that I've been cooking up lately,
Do it.
which relates to this, which is that in progressive, like politically progressive spaces, especially in the US, there's a kind of like working model of how do you create a safe and productive meeting. And the method is like at the start of the event, there's kind of a script that we're going to recite. We're going to acknowledge all these different kinds of oppression and bigotry, and we're going
Mm.
to make a kind of list of the excluded behaviors. Um, and and we're going to tell everyone you're not allowed to be bad. You got to be a good person while you're here.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm maybe making a little light of that. I understand where it comes from, and I think it's better than nothing in a lot of cases, but it's also like incredibly harsh for the vibe.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and I just
Yes.
don't believe that it works. Like I don't think that rules are where good behavior comes from.
Yeah.
The alternate approach is more like the tribal elder, where it's like someone that everybody respects has invited us together and they've said, "Hey, we've come here for this purpose. We're going to have a good time, be decent, and if anyone causes any shit, they got to answer to me." And everyone
Yeah.
relaxes and they're like, "Great, we're gonna have a fine, good old time, and we don't need
Yeah.
any rules, and that's enough." And so like that's this is your invitation is just be the tribal elder for 2 days.
Yes, I love that. And also, this is so politically incorrect, but at the beginning of the Wagon Box event, we subverted that whole progressive politics thing, and we were like, we're on, I just want to recognize that we're on Paul McNeil's stolen land that she stole from the and like just making fun of like that thing exists, and also kind of making fun of Paul, and just like we're just joking around here. Um, we are trying to have fun. And then like there was also a couple of times where um people were like, I don't know, drinking too much, staying out too late, like making fun of them just gently. How
Mhm.
are you doing this morning? Hungover, like these kind of like just a little bit of policing, but in like very jovial ways. Like it just sets the tone, and like making sure people are having fun and not taking it too seriously. Like I completely agree with you on these. It might as well be like, yeah, school or something, where you just the first thing you hear is like all the rules from the teacher, and it just feels like very authoritarian, and then you're like walking on eggshells, like I don't want to break any rules. If you start with jokes, people know that they can be loose and have fun with it a bit, and be themselves and open up a bit, and I think that's like
Yeah.
the main thing you really want to impress at the beginning. And like I think what you were saying before, like having us just joking around together, like maybe me, Patrick, and Gord can get up there at the beginning, and we're like very jovial together. So that's how it was at the Wagon Box event. It was me, Paul, McNeil, and James Pogue, and we're just kind of like, riffing on the theory, how the event came to be, and making fun of each other a little bit, saying this Paul McNeil stolen land thing, like all this, jokes.
If you're in a community theater, you could open with a little skit.
Oh my God. I could see Patrick actually wanting to do that.
Uh,
Improv. Oh my God. This was so helpful. This was so helpful. I'm gonna send this to the attendees of this event, besides it being like a normal Doomer Optimism
hmm.
podcast, and hopefully is helpful to people when they're thinking about how to make events, how to be a good, attendee at events. But I'll just say this before we close out, that anyone who is attending this event, anything that sort of sparks you from this conversation that makes you sort of want to give me your 2 cents in advance, in terms of design or what you would want to bring to the event, your intention, your goals, please just send me an email and we'll coordinate. Anything else, Rich, before we
Um,
finish?
just to say, if there's anyone that's interested in having these kind of conversations with me, this is my job, but it's also the thing that I love to do. It's fun. So probably the easiest is reach out to me on Twitter, send me a DM if you're like thinking about event design and how to make events awesome.
Yeah.
And depending on the context, either it'll be fun and we'll do it for free, or you can pay me and it'll be my job. Both options are good for me.
And we'll put your handle in the show notes and contact. All right. Thank
Nice.
you for so
Very good.
much for doing this. Yep.